So I'm sure you guys are aware of the new Ubisoft shooter coming out called XDefiant, and a lot of people have actually called this the potential COD killer, but for me, I actually think it could have the adverse effect and be the COD reviver. So today I wanted to go through my thoughts on that. If you're interested in XDefiant content, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. Now, like I said, a lot of people have touted this game as the game that could actually dethrone Call of Duty. Firstly, it is free to play, and that is something that has a really big advantage over Call of Duty. Obviously, when it comes to Warzone, that is free, but the base games of Call of Duty and pretty much every shooter out there, they're not free. So XDefiant does have a pretty big advantage there, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. On top of that, it's also got no skill-based matchmaking, at least not in the casual modes anyway. They've confirmed there will be ranked modes, but that is where the SBMM will be. There will be none whatsoever when it comes to the regular sort of casual game modes. So that's obviously a really big issue in the Call of Duty community as well, the skill-based matchmaking, and it just makes every single game feel identical to the last one. Every single game feels super sweaty, and the Call of Duty community, at least the vocal minority online, do seem to have a really big issue with that. But because XDefiant doesn't have it, a lot of people are really interested in that. On top of those 2 points as well, it is even being produced by ex-Call of Duty developers, not so much the entire team, but there are a lot of people who work on the team who have been almost poached from some of the older Call of Duty games. So there is a lot going for this game. It is poised to do really well, and it's had a lot of hype so far, and that is why a lot of people have touted it as a game that could dethrone Call of Duty. Now, with that being said, I do think a lot of people throw around the term quote-unquote COD killer quite a lot. Obviously, if you guys have followed the channel, you'll know I cover Battlefield 2042, and leading up to that game, people were genuinely saying like this is going to be the Call of Duty killer, and yet it was a catastrophic failure. So I've seen it thrown around a lot. A lot of people, pretty much anytime any new shooter comes out, people say, oh, this is the COD killer. But I'll be honest, XDefiant is the first game that I've actually heard people say that about, and I've looked at it and gone, you know what, it actually can compete with Call of Duty. Now, when I say that, I'm not so much talking in terms of sales and popularity. There is no chance in hell this game becomes bigger than Call of Duty. I'll say that right now. There's just no chance. But in terms of being more enjoyable and sort of scratching that arcade shooter itch for a lot of players, I do think it actually can compete on that side of things. Now, even though I just said it can compete, for me, it actually does have the adverse effect to, you know, people saying it's the COD killer. I think it could potentially be the COD reviver. The way that I see it is that if this game is super successful, like it looks like it could potentially be, that is only going to be good competition for Activision with all of the Call of Duty franchise. We also know that Activision has just been bought out by Microsoft, so they now have essentially unlimited funding. It obviously still relies on them being run properly at the end of the day, but if they get the right people in the right places, and they have unlimited funding, then Call of Duty could just kick off even bigger than it already has. But if they do see XDefiant being successful, and being successful because it's free and because it's got no skill-based matchmaking and stuff like that, they could actually look at that and go, you know what, maybe we should go back to our roots a little bit as well. We see with XDefiant that it's working. We've got the bigger player base. Why don't we do that as well? So I think if XDefiant is actually successful for the reasons that I think it will be successful, that could just potentially show Activision that you don't have to have skill-based matchmaking. You don't have to have a flashy new shooter every year. You can make more of a like old school Call of Duty shooter, and it can still be successful. On top of that, if XDefiant is successful as well, it could also just kick them into gear and almost make them feel a little bit threatened in terms of Activision I'm talking about. They could feel a bit threatened and go, you know what, this game's blowing up. We need to do something about it. Even though competition is good, Call of Duty and Activision, they're not going to want another game like encroaching on their territory. That's not what they want. Competition's good to sort of kick them into gear, but it is not good in terms of sales. They don't want that to happen. They want essentially a monopoly in the shooter genre. And so, like I said, it could kick them into gear and make them go, you know what, this game's doing really well. We need to make the best shooter ever to essentially just take back control of the shooter genre. So those are sort of 2 points there where I think if XDefiant is successful, it could potentially actually kick Activision into gear and also show them what works, in that whatever makes XDefiant popular, they can obviously cherry pick that into their own games as well. Maybe going back to a more like old school typical Call of Duty game from the past rather than how the more modern games have been, because even though the modern games are doing really well for sales and stuff, I definitely think the community is much less happy with how the current games have been. Now, those two examples were if XDefiant has a successful launch. On the flip side of that, could be a catastrophic failure. This is a completely new franchise. There is no guarantee in this world that this game is going to do well. I personally think it will do well, but it could be an absolute bust. There is no way to tell until it actually launches. And again, I think if it is a bust, that is also only going to help Call of Duty as well. People might play XDefiant for months of really hoping it turns around, and it just sort of never does. And people eventually get sick of the game and go, you know what, I actually really miss Call of Duty. I'm going to go back to that game, just essentially driving more and more traffic to Call of Duty. So I think whether it is an absolute huge success or whether it is literally the worst game of all time, I only see this helping Activision at the end of the day, which sounds weird. You would think that a big competitor is something that would scare Activision or make Call of Duty, you know, a bit more of a risk in this genre. But I honestly don't see any way in which XDefiant actually hurts Call of Duty. So like I said, a lot of people are calling it the COD killer. I actually think it's going to have the opposite effect and be essentially the COD reviver. Not that COD needs reviving, like I said, it is the highest selling game every single year. It is literally the biggest franchise in gaming in terms of like yearly releases anyway. And so it doesn't need reviving in that sense, but I do think there are a lot of issues about the game that a lot of people want to see fixed, and this could be what essentially revives it on that side of things. I think it is going to be very interesting to watch. I am super hopeful for the game. Playing the beta made me realize that it is actually super fun, and I think it has a lot of potential. And the fact that it is free to play as well, it means there's essentially no risk. If you download it, you play it, and you think it sucks, well, you just delete it. So I'm very hopeful for the game. I really hope it succeeds, just because I do think competition in this shooter genre is always a good thing. So I will definitely be keeping a close eye on the game. And like I said, if you guys want to see more XDefiant content, be sure to let me know down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. I'm also keen to hear what you guys think will happen as well. Do you think XDefiant will be a success, or do you think it's going to be an absolute bust? So let me know down below as well. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.